Hello and welcome everyone. Today we have with us Dr. Seema Singh, Assistant Professor at Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. Dr. Seema completed her LLM from Lucknow University in 2007 and her doctorate from the prestigious Jamia Millia Islamia University in 2016. After clearing the UGC NET in 2006, Dr. Seema started her career as a lecturer with Amity Law School, Delhi, before joining the Faculty of Law, University of Delhi as an assistant professor in 2008. Apart from this, during her career as an academician, Dr. Seema has co-edited 2 books, published 13 research papers, 39 articles, 2 book reviews, and participated as a panelist resource person in over 76 sessions. Dr. Seema is a familiar face for many of us, having seen her appear as an expert speaker on more than 50 programs televised over several popular channels such as Lok Sabha TV, NDTV, Z, ABP News, Republic, News 27, 24, News Nation, ABPN, etc. It's an honor to speak with you today, ma'am. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Ritu. Thank you, Ritu. Thank you.
To begin with, tell us something about your journey into the legal field. Was law always your desired field, and when did you decide to pursue academics?
Actually, Ritu, when I was a student, it was never in my mind that ever I will join this field of law. But once I was in my final year of graduation, then I started realizing that I want to do something different. And then because, in my family background, there is nobody from the legal fraternity. So it was a very new kind of experiment for me. But my seniors inspired me to join this legal field. And so I decided to go for LLB and then LLB, LLM, PhD. And, in this way, I kept up on collecting different kind of degrees and then I pursued academics.
Right. Which subjects are you currently teaching at the Delhi University?
Actually, now I preferably teach LLM students and I am also teaching PhD students. But yes, in LLB, I will say that my core area is constitutional law and law of evidence, though I have taught several subjects like media law, administrative law, and so many other laws. But yes, my core area of interest for LLB students is evidence law and constitutional law.
Right. Since it's an important subject of law, mastering the subject within a few months of college is not possible. How would you advise students to study if they plan to do judiciary in the future?
Actually, law is a subject in which a very in-depth knowledge and analytical skill is required. So, if somebody wants to pursue for judiciary or want to prepare for any other competitive examination, then the understanding about the subject is very much important. So I personally believe if they are very much attentive in the classes and their learning speed is fast, then they can crack this examination very easily, because once you are going to compare the judicial examination with the rest of the exams like UPSC or State Public Service Commission, the competition is comparatively restricted because only those who are LLB or law graduates, only they can appear for this examination. So consistency, dedication, and clarity about the law, these are sufficient. And I personally believe that even for 1 year you are going to prepare very sincerely, you can clear this examination in your first attempt. And I have seen so many of my students have done it. So very sincere effort. I am not saying that they should study for 16 or 15 hours, just 5 to 6 hours, but sincerely and dedicatedly. If they are going to do it, they can very easily, clear it within 1 or 2 attempts.
What books do you personally suggest for your subject?
Law is something, especially when we talk about the constitutional law. Constitutional law these days is changing very fast. So I will not suggest to go for a particular book, but yes, for the students' point of view, MP Jain book and DD Basu book is very much important. But I personally believe that they should keep themselves updated regarding the new judgments and the new developments which are happening in the field of law. And now in the era of information and technology, accessing information is very much important. But I will suggest students for one more thing. It is not the important thing that you are going to collect the information from various sources. The important thing is how you are going to process the information. So once you are receiving some kind of news through newspapers or through any online platform, please go and cross verify and cross check it, and then try to develop your own understanding that what actually is happening. And I will also suggest students to develop their own views and their own ideas. It is not like, you are working like an artificial intelligence, or you are working like a robot, that you are just collecting the information. So please don't do it. You also process the information and you develop a way of proper thinking, because law is something which is going to touch different aspects of the society. So unless and until you have a comprehensive knowledge, basically you cannot understand it, and you cannot grow, you cannot develop. So for my subject, definitely I will suggest MP Jain and DD Basu. And for Indian Evidence Act, or evidence law, I will suggest the book of Munir and Bhattukla. That is a very good student edition. So both these books are very good for students, especially if they are going to prepare for competitive examinations. So that is my suggestion to them.
Nice. Since you shortlist students for no, you're also the convener of Debate and Discussion Society of CLC. How important
Yes.
a role do activities such as debating and mooting have in a law student's life?
This is the most important part of any law student, debating and mooting. And one important thing, again, I will repeat, in debating, because one day you have to appear yourself before the court. Most of the students, their first choice is litigation. So obviously you are going to appear before the court. There you have to debate with another lawyer in a way. But once you are going to debate, remember, debate means always it should be a constructive debate. So, certain things are very much important, like, the presumption, how another party is going to answer a particular question, what issues they are going to raise, what is the psychology of the judge, how you are going to read it, and how basically you have to prepare for your cases in a complete manner. The issues, the legal aspect, the current aspect, the facts, and so many other things. So, it's a kind of practice, and you attain or you develop your, mooting skill by the time. So it takes some times, but yes, with the help of good training and good teachers, you can achieve this, or these skills much faster than others. So we try to train them through different kinds of meaning. But yes, one very important thing which is very relevant for mooting, and that is clarity about law and clarity about subject. That gives you a lots of confidence. So you should be very much clear about the legal provision. And the second thing is, you should be very much confident that whatever you are going to argue, that is fundamentally and that is legally correct. And your knowledge also enhances your confidence. So knowledge is the most important part.
Right. You also shortlist students for debate and moot court competitions and are regularly invited by other colleges to judge such competitions. What aspect of the presentation do you base your reliance on?
The first and in law, nothing is final. Today court has pronounced one judgment, tomorrow that can be changed also. So it all depends upon your convincing and communication skill. So if I am going to judge a moot, the most important thing is how much the advocate or the party is able to convince me, how much he is able to communicate his ideas and thoughts. So this is the most important thing. And you can convince anybody only with the help of your knowledge. So clarity about the subject, which is ultimately going to convert into the confidence, and you must have a conviction that whatever you are going to convince the bench, personally you are convinced about that particular thing. So these are the small things which plays a very important role either in the moot courts or in the proper courts. So yes, communication skills and the convincing skill, these are the key to success in this particular profession.
How can one improve their oratory skills for debates, panel discussions, and mooting?
To develop your oratory skill, I think you should be a patient listener. You cannot grow unless and until you are going to listen patiently, because learning is a continuous process. And to learn, you should listen first, and then you should process the information. Then what I will suggest, you read, you contemplate, you develop your own understanding and your own thought, and be a patient listener. Just listen that how good lawyers are going to argue. Just listen those people who are going to impress you through their oratory skill, and subsequently you will realize that by the passage of time, automatically you start inculcating some good qualities which are ultimately going to be very advantageous for you in developing your oratory skill. So you should be a very good observant, you should be a very patient listener, and you should be very much confident about your knowledge and about your understanding. So these are very key things to develop your oratory skills.
You've been the co-convener of the placement committee of Law Center 1, Faculty of Law since 2014. What are the main focal areas for law firms in shortlisting the candidates during their placement?
It depends that for what purpose they are going to shortlist you, So either some students have a very good personality, some have very good oratory skills, some are very good researcher, some academic qualifications are very strong, but they are not very vocal. So, it depends that for what purpose they are going to pick you. But yes, if you are in this field, then at least at one point you should be very strong. Firstly, try to be a complete package. You should be a good researcher. You must have a good oratory skill. You must have a good understanding about the subject. But at least in one or two, you should try to develop yourself as your core area. So these are the, the basic things. And even if they're going to hire someone, they also see that if they are going to invest their time and money in a particular student, then how much potential the particular student is having and how much he is interested to grow himself. So I think hard work is another very important thing, and hard work is the key to success, because if continuously you are trying to improve yourself, then by the passage of time, you will start realizing year by year, month by month, you are actually going to improve. So once we are talking about the placement, it is very much important that for what position you are going to apply for corporates, you are going to apply for law firms, and what is their requirement. According to their requirement, you should grow, you should improve yourself. But yes, understanding about the law and your presentation, these two things are very, very, very important.
Right, absolutely. We hear that apart from being an assistant professor and convener, coordinator of several committees and societies, you supervise PhD candidates as well. Can you guide our aspirants as how they should pick up their topic of specialization and what kind of efforts goes into completing a PhD course in India?
Actually, Ritu, it's a very important question which you have raised, because when the PhD students approach me, I have most of the time I have seen that they are more influenced with the topics which are more popularized. The others are doing in this particular subject, so I should also pick this subject. Or sometimes it happens that in this particular area, so much of literature is available, so I should give for this subject. But what I will suggest to them, don't go by what others are doing. For PhD as well as for the dissertation in LLM, I will suggest you what is going to touch to your heart. Because if something is going to touch you emotionally, or you are going to sometimes, with certain topics or certain subjects, you feel very much connected. So please pick up that area for your research. So I will give you example in my case. When I was thinking I was planning to apply for my PhD, it was again a very important question for me that what should be my topic. And at that point of time, so many crimes, crimes against women, they were gradually increasing. So I was just thinking why, there is no deterrence in the society, and why the rate of conviction is very low. So at the end of the day, I realized that there is definitely some problem with investigation, because our courts follow adversarial system. So the judges are going to pronounce their judgment on the basis of the collected evidences. So if the quality of the investigation is not good, ultimately the accused person is not going to be convicted. Then I realized that the forensic science can play a very important role in effective investigation, and then I picked this topic of forensic science. So I gave you just one example, because when I decided to work on this topic, there were very less number of students who could dare to work on this, because literature was not available on this topic. So it was not very easy to pick this topic for your PhD. But I did it because this was something which was very close to my heart. So if something is very close to your heart, you first thing you will do a quality work, and the second thing, at any cost, you will do anything to produce a quality work. So you are not going to compromise with the quality. And believe me, at the end of the day, you are going to learn more things, much more thing in comparison to those who are going to pick a topic on the basis of the popular, on the basis of the popular choices. So please pick the subject in which you are interested. Pick the topic which is going to which is going to make a kind of emotional connect with you, and then only you should start working on that particular topic. So this is my suggestion to all those who are planning to pursue their dissertation or their PhD. And same thing is applicable in LLM dissertation also.
Right. Thank you. My next question was that itself, that since you mentor LLM candidates also, what all should they keep in their mind, pointers for their dissertation. So thank you for answering that itself.
Same thing, Ritu.
Right. Your doctoral dissertation was focused on the laws on narcotic drugs in India and their loopholes, and you have extensive knowledge about media laws, having taught the subject. What are your views about the Bollywood drug case following the death of Sushant Singh Rajput? Do you think the investigation has been compromised by the media's role?
Actually, as of now, we are not in the position to say anything in a conclusive manner in case of Sushant Singh Rajput case, because the investigation is going on. And we all are aware that earlier this Mumbai police has said that it was suicide, and subsequently if the investigation is still going on, then it seems that actually not necessarily it was a suicide. And it was a suicide. If it was a suicide, then maybe it was abetted. So, Sushant Singh Rajput's case is very important for all the youngsters and young generation also, that how the drugs is going to spoil, our young population. And young generation should be very much careful. It's a very long and very debatable topic, and we can discuss different aspects of this, drug peddling and drug dealing and drug consumption, and how youngster from different strata, they are going to be affected. We have seen the example of Punjab, how it completely spoiled the youths of Punjab, and it is something which is very, very serious. So some other day we will discuss in detail. But yes, because Sushant Singh Rajput case is still going on, investigation is going on, and has completed 1 year. Still charge sheet has not been filed. So there are so many questions. But at this point of time, I don't think that I should comment anything, because we can also say that just because of media, the case was reopened. Otherwise, it was a closed case where the Mumbai police has already declared that it is a case of suicide. So let's see once the charge sheet is going to be filed, what they are going to mention in the charge sheet. Until then, I think it's better to wait.
Right. When reporting sensitive issues, what restraints are or can be imposed on media houses under the Indian laws to protect the interests of all the parties involved?
I think, Ritu, it's a very important question. And unfortunately, even if we see the judicial pronouncement, I am more worried, because the judges are, pronouncing continuously their judgment in the favor of right to freedom of speech and expression. And that is perfectly valid. But one thing which is very much important, and which has not been openly acknowledged anywhere in the Indian Constitution or any judicial pronouncement, if I am an individual and I am going to make my opinion based upon the content which I am going to receive in the form of information. And who is the source of information? Media houses are the source of information. That can be print media, that can be electronic media. If they are going to misinform me, if they are going to miscommunicate me, then basically my opinion cannot be a healthy opinion. They are going to influence my thought very negatively. So if once I have I am being informed or miscommunicated, my right to receive fair information has been violated. So if the courts are very much, interested in protecting about the right to freedom of speech and expression, the person who is at the receiving end, his or her right is equally important. And the core of that particular right is I have right to receive correct information. What is happening, and it has become so rampant, and I believe that now none of us absolutely believe in any news which is going to be published in the print media or going to be telecasted to the electronic media. And the recent threat is the social media, because the problem is too, we all have right to freedom of speech and expression, but we do not want to take the responsibility that how we should be very much cautious and careful, that our work can cause a huge damage if we are not taking any responsibility. But the matter which is very serious concern for me and for all of us, the wall of 19 sub clause 2, that is gradually going to be demolished by the media houses, and up to certain extent through the judicial pronouncements also, the restrictions are gradually going to be diluted. And these OTT platforms, they are going to create another threat, because now there is no filtering of 19 sub clause 2. So by the time, I personally believe the dilution of 19 sub clause 2 is not a very good thing in the country like India. And that's why within a few seconds, through the electronic media, print media, all social media, fake news are going to spread like anything. So I think there is a need of a very strong law, or the judiciary should take an initiative and declare right to receive fair information as the necessary and essential part of right to freedom of speech and expression, or right to know. Otherwise, this, media houses, they are completely unregulated in a way. They are regulating themselves. And if I'm going to regulate myself, why I will try to follow very strict norms? I will follow which suits me better. And it's a very debatable topic, and we all are very much aware that there is a conflict between 19.1a and 19.1g. So whether they are serving their 19.1g or they are serving their 19.1a, that is also something which is, which is needed to be decided. There should be a clear-cut demarcation.
Right, right.
FDI in media, most of the media houses, they are the big corporate houses, so they are more interested in profit making. And if you are more interested in profit making, definitely you are not interested about the the fairness about the news. You are more interested in about your TRPs, which is ultimately going to give a monetary benefit to you.
Right. And what books do you suggest for media laws to understand this whole aspect of media and 19?
Actually, Ritu, the issue is on media laws. There are good, I will not say that in India enough number of good books are available, but yes, for the Indian students, I will suggest that there is a book of Madhavi Diwan, that is on media law, and then there is another book of Iyer and Venkatesh over the media law regulation. So I will suggest these two books, because I know that the students do not have that much of time where they are going to read so much of literature. But for Indian author, yes, Iyer and Venkatesh and Madhavi Diwan, these two books I will suggest for the students.
Right, thank you. You were the deputy director of a project titled Agrarian Issues and Plight of Farmers, which was awarded by Indian Council of Social Science Research in 2019. Since you're familiar with the situation of farmers in India, we would like to hear your views on the controversial farm bills.
Again, I will say, Ritu, that there are 3 amendments and 3 amended legislations. So it's a very broad topic, but yes, in brief, I will just try to highlight certain points which are very much important. Since liberalization, means since 1991 to till now, around 3 lakh farmers have committed suicide, and the numbers of farmers who are leaving the occupation of agriculture, that is gradually increasing. And what is the reason? The reason is agriculture is not a profitable job, So if we are not going to make it profitable, definitely the next generation, they are not going to continue in this particular occupation for so long. And another important thing is, Ritu, because I think COVID has given us a lots of lesson. And one of the very important lesson, which I think we all should understood, within the lockdown of few months, I'm talking about the first wave of COVID-19, the big economic powers, their economy started shattering, you know, they started facing a lots of problem, lots of unemployment. They were not in the position to give salaries to their employees. There was lots of retrenchment. And you know, this particular COVID crisis has given a very important lesson. And that particular important lesson is only the need-based developmental model can be sustainable and not the greed-based. So you see the agriculture sector, the health sector and education sector is still they are surviving. But rest of the sectors which were basically based upon the consumerism or luxurious items, they could not survive. Car sector could not survive. Aviation sector could not survive. Luxuries could not survive. So basically, you know, because India is famous, we don't know, basically the youngsters are very less aware about the sustainable model which was given by our ancestors. And when we talk about the sustainability, agriculture sector is a very important thing. And you know, India is a blessed country. We have capacity to feed entire population of the world, but still this potential is untapped. Why it is untapped? Because agriculture and profit, we are not able to establish a correlation. So that's why with this purpose, and you will be surprised to know that in last few years, your food packaging and food processing industry, it has seen the growth of 700% rise, but the financial condition of farmers is not increasing. What is the problem? The problem is they are not able to make some value addition in their products. So what is the purpose? The objective of the government is to provide more options to the farmers, and the government know that they don't have capacity to, you know, create some big storage capacity to keep these grains for unlimited time period. And we all are very much aware कि किस तरीके से नींद खराब हो जाता है और इनको फेंक दिया जाता है. So if we are able to tap our potential, we can be the largest exporter of grains, and we can export these grains across the world. So you know, if we could tap it, then it can enhance the financial condition of the farmers very much. So as per my understanding, I am in very much favor of these agri reforms, at least because either we should come up with some better solutions. You know, if I am going to say that this is bad, then I must have the answer of this question also, that why it is bad and then what is the good. The problem with this agriculture reform is the certain group of people are saying that this is bad, but they have no answer of this question, that if the old policy was good, then why 3 lakh farmers committed suicide, you know. So one day, if you want, I will take a complete session over these 3 legislation, because I have done so much program over these agriculture reforms. But for at this point of view, I think this is more than sufficient, because that is a very lengthy topic, and then we will have to discuss all the 3 segments of this amended legislations.
Right. Well, thank you on that insight. You've also co-edited the book titled Reflections on Ancient Indian Jurisprudence in the Current Social and Judicial Setup. That was published this year. Can you tell us more about it?
Actually, Ritu, you know, jurisprudence is something which is the soul of law. But unfortunately, students are least interested. And even if we are going to teach students about the jurisprudence, most of the times we are discussing the Western thinkers. You know, why Indian law and American law is different? Because the circumstances of America is different from India. But the most unfortunate part with Indian laws is, in India, most of the jurists which we are going to discuss in our syllabus, they are the Western jurists, and they have nothing to do with our own circumstances. You know, so we are going to apply something which is not suitable to us. So what is working in my mind when we were working over this book? The important thing is to make students aware about their own jurisprudence, The culture of one country is different from culture of another country, and that is the reason that the law of one country is different from law of another country. We cannot blindly apply, but actually we are trying to blindly apply legislations which are most of the time borrowed from the different countries, and that's why you can see that we have made thousands of legislation, but still we are not able to deliver justice. You know why? Because they are not according to our need. And why they are not according to our need? Because we never discuss our own jurisprudence, we never discuss our own reality, we never discuss our own requirement. So that's why I decided decided to work on this book. And this book basically deals with the Indian jurisprudence. Because India, we never want to realize it, that India had a position of Vishwaguru, and this position was not given by Indians. This position was given by most intellectual class of the whole world. So once if somebody is going to say that Bharat Vishwa Guru tha, so this is our responsibility at least to search कि क्यों ऐसा कहा जाता था. So this book is a search in that particular direction, that what was the contribution of our ancestors in the field of the legal jurisprudence. So it is a kind of a revival of Indian jurisprudence, which I personally feel is very, very required to make the young generation aware that what is actually Indian jurisprudence is all about.
Right. And over the years, you have taught several courses, given lectures, and published detailed work on comparative constitution and related topics. Can you suggest some commentaries for our viewers?
In case of India, I will suggest comparative constitution book of D.D. Basu and Mr. M.P. Singh. These are the two books which are very, very, very relevant and which are more than sufficient for students at this particular level. Otherwise, there are several books of foreign authors, so I will not suggest at this point of time. These two books are sufficient for the students, basically for the LLB students.
Right. And you were nominated by the Honorable Governor and Chancellor of Rajrishi Bhartrihari Matsya University, Alwar, Rajasthan, as member of Academic Council for the period of 2018 to 20. What were the responsibilities that came with the role?
The basic purpose of the academic standard which is going to be prescribed and which should ideally be maintained in a particular university. So my basic role was just to ensure that the curriculum of the university has been properly drafted. There is a proper ratio of student and teachers, what subject they are going to teach, what kind of infrastructure facilities are available. So ultimately, in crux or in brief, you can say just to contribute in enhancing the quality education in that particular university. So whatever is required for that is basically related with the curriculum and the quality teaching. That was my main responsibility as a nominated member of Academic Council.
You're also the convener of Gender Sensitization Committee of Campus Law Center, Delhi University. How relevant is an issue of how relevant is an issue of gender sensitivity in today's day and age, and what all activities does the committee organize?
It is a very relevant issue, Ritu, and I have seen, unfortunately, not in Delhi, but in most of the part of India, not in India, but across the globe, we have seen the cases of gender discrimination, and unfortunately, still it is prevailing. So the problem is the understanding about a particular gender. So there is a discrimination because the society believes that this is not at par with another gender. So the important thing is to make students aware that why gender sensitization is important, why gender equality is important. And most of the times we do many things because without realizing the consequences of our action. So once because I have also delivered several lectures over the gender sensitization. So most of the time we don't realize even that if we are going to do something which is actually bad, how it is going to affect the psychology, or the how it is going to affect the psychology of a particular person who is basically at the receiving end. So being the member of the gender sensitization committee, sometimes I also receive complaints of girls regarding certain cases of sexual harassments. And I have as of now I have dealt with several cases. So obviously there is a problem, but this is something which can be solved only through sensitization. And this gender sensitization has different other aspects also. How children are going to be groomed in a particular family, how the society or the society is going to consider about the sexuality of a particular person. So there are so many dimensions. So in our gender sensitization committee, we keep organizing certain programs related with gender issues, and our basic purpose to develop an atmosphere which could provide a much safer atmosphere to girl students. Things are changing. Obviously, now I've also seen that the boys are very protective about their friends, which are basically girls. But yes, this thing can also not be denied that women are still facing a lots of discrimination at every level. So for that purpose, the women should be made aware about their rights, but simultaneously men or boys should be made aware that why they should not discriminate to the women, and if they are going to discriminate, how this is going to affect their own life in the long run.
Right.
So there are several aspects of this. So we keep sensitizing students about all these issues.
Lastly, if you were to suggest 3 changes in the current legal education system, what would they be?
I think there are so many changes are required.
Right.
But if you are asking 3, so I will suggest 3 things. The first thing, as I told you, that we largely ignored Indian jurisprudence. And the basic difference between the Indian jurisprudence and the Western jurisprudence is the difference of collectivism and individualism. So these days, if you see the judgments of the judges, then you can see a clear-cut demarcation between the urban and the rural jurisprudence. Now the judges have been divided, the judgments have been divided between the urban and the rural jurisprudence. And what is the reason? The reason is, many times those who are sitting, or those who are residing in the big cities, they have no ideas about, what a person is going to face in the rural area of this particular country. We have no idea about our history. We have no idea about the psychology, about the literature, about the society. So we should always remember that law is something which is going to affect different dimensions of life. But unfortunately, when we teach law to the students, we apply the Kelson's theory of pure law. So we believe that law is something which is pure. No, if you don't know your society, if you don't know your culture, if you don't know your philosophy, if you don't know your literature, you cannot understand law. So the jurisprudence means how the law has developed, how the law has originated. So one very important aspect on which I will suggest that Bar Council of India and the legal academia should work, and that is new way of drafting of jurisprudence. That is very much important. The second important thing is, as I told you, it is interdisciplinary. So please don't consider it as a pure theory of law. And unfortunately, personally being a teacher, I am very much dissatisfied the way the law is taught to the students. They don't have basic idea. We are not touching the soul of the law. We are not touching the root of the law. So that's why most of the thing we are going to understand and develop law in a very mechanical process. No, law can never be understood through a mechanical process. It can never be applied through a mechanical process. If you are able to understand in a very comprehensive manner, then only this legal system can be evolved. So that again, that's something on which I can speak so many things, but as of now, I'm not going to speak so much. The third important thing is, producing quality is more important than producing quantity. So I think the Bar Council of India should be very much, very much now. It's a very high time. We are producing around 60 to 80,000 students per year who are going to complete their LLB or who are going to join bar or bench. And then remember, 80,000, it's a very big number. So if we are not able to maintain the quality, we are going to create a problem for these students also, because they are going to face a lots of problem of survival in the legal field. And if you cannot survive, then definitely you are going to compromise with your quality. So this is a very big challenge. So that's why I would suggest that the quality should give preference over the quantity. And the last thing is more practical and more empirical study. Law is not in books. So I think I'm the only teacher who always convey one thing to my students, that read less and think more. Unfortunately, what happens, we read more and we think less. No, just do the reverse thing. Read less and think more. Automatically, you will start receiving knowledge. So the problem is, don't make it very much bookish. No, please don't do it. It should be more practical, and the study should be more empirical. If you are not able to establish a connect between the society and those who are working in the legal field, we are not able to serve the society through the legal instruments. So that is all my suggestion about the reform in the law field through the legal education.
Right. Well, with that last question, we come to an end of this enriching conversation. Thank you so much, ma'am, for sparing your valuable time. We had a lovely time speaking with you. I hope you felt the same.
Thank you so much, Ritu. It was really nice. And there is a paucity of time. So because of that, we could not discuss so many things. And even otherwise, many questions which you raised that need a lengthy discussion. So some other day we will discuss on some other topic. And my best wishes to you and to entire team. And I wish you that you keep doing good things for the society and for the legal profession.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We'd love to have you another time. But yes, until next time, just take care and be safe.
Thank you, Ritu. Thank you so much. Thank you.